Washington, D.C. is a city filled with crime, but the address of this particular murder will change the rules when a D.C. cop on the outside is teamed with a Secret Service agent on the inside to track a mysterious homicide right up to the first family's front door. This was the tagline of 1997's Murder at 1600, a political thriller starring Wesley Snipes and Diane Lane that I think is a bit forgotten. So let's get into how this movie was made, how it performed, and how it holds up in this episode of Vintage 90s. Hey, what's up out there, everybody? Thank you, as always, for stopping by the channel. It's greatly appreciated. If you're new here, I'm Anthony DeJoya, and this is Movies Never Say Die, your home for 80s and 90s movie talk. Consider subscribing if you enjoy the content, and give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Now, Murder at 1600, as I said, is a bit forgotten. I wouldn't go as far as to call it a hidden gem, but the performances, the story, and the moody atmosphere of this film do enable it to hold up surprisingly well despite the passing of time. Murder at 1600 would come from relatively simple beginnings. Writers Wayne Beach and David Hodgen had written a script revolving around a murder that occurs inside the White House, and the plot would follow a savvy detective and a Secret Service agent who would work together to uncover the layers of conspiracy to solve this case. Producer Arnold Coppelson, known for films like The Fugitive and Seven and Outbreak, would be attached to the script, so along with fellow producer Arnold Milchan, they would offer it to director Dwight Little. Now, at the time, Dwight Little was an accomplished action director with movies like Marked for Death and Rapid Fire and Broken Arrow under his belt. Suspense wasn't really his forte, but he'd always wanted to make a political thriller, given that conspiracy movies were his favorite genre, so he accepted, and production was underway at Warner Brothers, with Murder at 1600 being given a $40 million budget. From there, the casting would begin, and this is one of Murder at 1600's strongest aspects, in my opinion, because I think the ensemble cast wrapped around its two leads is fantastic. Now, Murder at 1600 was originally slated to star Bruce Willis and Diane Lane. Lane had always been attracted to the role of Secret Service agent Nina Chance. The character was supposed to be a former Olympic sharpshooter. Diane Lane had markswoman training. The character was also very strong-willed and clever and abided by a personal code. And more importantly, she was vital to the plot, not just a damsel in distress. So Lane was always interested in the role from the beginning. Bruce Willis, on the other hand, wasn't so sure about this role, and ultimately he would leave the project to take the starring role in Luc Besson's The Fifth Element instead, which we all know would turn out to be a fantastic career move for him. Now, this leads us to an unmade movie from Warner Brothers that they had a lot of hopes for at the time, called Sandblast. Now, this film would center around an explosive expert who would team up with a group of commandos to hunt down lost nuclear warheads in post-war Iraq before an evil group of Green Berets could get their hands on them. Oddly enough, it was originally planned for Eddie Murphy to star in this one, but he left due to scheduling conflicts. Warner Brothers then signed Snipes to a $10 million contract to take over and star in this one. Jean-Claude Van Damme was going to be the co-star as the villainous leader of the Green Berets, but as pre-production really neared to a close, the studio began to have a lot of growing concerns over the needed budget for this movie and the potential box office draws of Snipes and Van Damme, so feeling unsure, Warner Brothers canceled the film just before production would begin. This cancellation would leave Wesley Snipes with an opening on his schedule, so he would take over the role of Detective Harlan Regis, and really I think Snipes was great in this part. He really fills up this character nicely, and alongside Diane Lane, they give this movie a strong 1-2 punch. During his prime, Snipes showed he could work alongside really anybody, with films co-starring Dennis Hopper and Sean Connery and Robert De Niro and Woody Harrelson and Sylvester Stallone, among many others. And here he pairs very well with Diane Lane to solidify this chance encounter partnership that will find the truth and hopefully solve a murder.
I asked you to leave.
Did he plant the button?
I don't know, okay?
Everybody's lying around.
And as I said earlier, the supporting ensemble here is a quality group of actors. You have Ronnie Cox playing the U.S. president, Tate Donovan plays his son, then you get the great Alan Alda as the national security advisor, and Daniel Benzali as the lead Secret Service agent, and then you get Dennis Miller as Snipes' partner on the force and the film's light comedic relief. It's a balanced cast of familiar character actors that are all easily able to elevate this admittedly generic material to fill this film with some quality quality characters.
This is global, Detective. It's a little bit off your turf.
This is a homicide. This is my turf.
Filming for Murder at 1600 would take place from August to October of 1996 throughout parts of Toronto and, of course, Washington, D.C., and production would be relatively smooth. However, there were some cuts made to the film in the editing room. If you watch the trailer, you'll notice that Snipes makes a grand helicopter entrance to the crime scene at the White House. This was deemed as being unrealistic and way too over the top, so it was cut, and there were some scenes between Snipes' Detective Regis and Benzali's Agent Spikings that were cut as well. For example, in one instance, Benzali says that Snipes' character was born to be a chalk outline, and since it implied Spikings was sort of a villain and not the truly devout agent that he was framed up as, these scenes were cut. Also cut were some love scenes between Snipes and Lane, which I think was a fantastic choice because keeping their relationship platonic really just made it feel more realistic, and it far served their partnership better for this film than had Lane been turned into a love interest. Once it was completed, Murder at 1600 would land softly into theaters on April 14th of 97, pulling in the number 3 spot with a $7.9 million weekend. Box office numbers would drop 40% the next week, placing the film in the number 6 spot, and it would limp out a meager $25.8 million stateside, with global totals boosting the final number for Murder at 1600 to just $41.1 million. Not the best numbers for a film with a $40 million budget, with additional promotional campaigns boosting the overall cost of the film assuredly more. The film would also do very little for Snipes' career at the time, who was sort of in limbo as a leading man in Hollywood. His action flicks Drop Zone and The Money Train weren't well received in 94, and 95 he did garner some praise for his performance in To Wong Fu and for his uncredited and heartbreaking role in Waiting to Exhale, where he shares a few scene-chewing moments with Angela Bassett. But the year before Murder is 1600, Snipes would also star in The Fan with Robert De Niro that didn't do too well either, and Murder at 1600 would also fail to boost his stock much either. However, despite the film being a financial loss for Warner Brothers and it being forgotten relatively quickly, I think it still holds up surprisingly well, and I think it's actually much more enjoyable than you would expect. I mean, sure, it doesn't do anything extremely amazing, but I think it does many things very well, and when you put them together, you get a quick-moving, by-the-numbers thriller with a solid plot, just enough action, and a collection of capable performances.
She was killed in my city.
She was killed in my house. Don't you ever forget that. He's all yours.
Now, to me, what really stands out the most about this film is the awesome musical score from Christopher Young. It's a slow instrumental score that's a bit elegant, a little seductive, and very ominous all at the same time. It's a perfect tone for Washington, D.C. as the backdrop, and I think it complements the mysterious political atmosphere extremely well, so the movie definitely does create a just charming mood and atmosphere for a strong mystery. I think the plot is layered just enough to keep things moving. Snipes' Detective Regis is assigned to this very important case involving the murder of a White House secretary. He also happens to be an American history buff, which will of course come into play later, and he and his fellow residents are all being evicted from their buildings so that it can be torn down to allow space for a government parking garage. So as I said, there's just enough going on to keep the pace moving without too much to distract from the focal plot of solving this murder and discovering why these POWs missing and being held captive in North Korea is going to tie in with it. Overall, like I said, the movie just moves very well. Snipes and Lane working together as a strong pair to solve this case is enjoyable. Their characters have differing approaches to their work, so it's fun to see how that works out. Lane is also bound by her responsibilities to the Secret Service, and as more secrets and conspiracies are exposed and tensions are dialed up and emotions are swirling, I think Snipes and Lane are able to deliver the needed layering for their characters. It's nothing special, but both are very capable and very easily likable.
I brought home the gold.
and Snipes gets a few moments to deliver some of his trademark action. The end of this film does veer into more of a traditional action flick from the methodical mystery of the first two acts. This was something that a lot of critics had issues with at the time, but I don't think it's all bad. I think Snipes and Lane, they clearly do a lot of their own stunts. It makes the scenes more visually appealing, and despite the convenient feel of our main characters sneaking around through the tunnels to try and save the day at the last minute, it still provides a charming adrenaline boost to close out this film. And in a nutshell, I would say Murder at 1600 is just an easily consumable thriller with both Snipes and Lane delivering spots of charm and action and humor and a little bit of drama. They have some good chemistry together. Their natural rapport makes watching them work together to solve this crime enjoyable, and with a handful of familiar faces in supporting roles, the entire cast feels nice and lived in particular from Alda and Benzali, and as well as Dennis Miller, whose sarcastic humor is really a constant source of levity to break the mood when needed. So overall, I had a good time with this film. I always enjoy watching it once in a while, and I'll give Murder at 1600 a solid B. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't seen this one, I recommend giving it a shot. It's a solid film that has held up well over the years. If you have seen this movie, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Once again, I really do appreciate you all, and I'll see you in my next video. And until then, movies never say die.
This is Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?